So that brings us
alignment
to Albert Einstein. Oh my God. So my contention with this conspiracy is not that Albert Einstein was some idiot, some moron. It's that media and pop culture has turned him into a guy who discovered all of these things around the same time. And yet when you actually do a deep dive on it, you realize that even contemporary scientists, this part isn't a conspiracy at all. Contemporary scientists with Einstein fucking hated him because he had a habit of plagiarizing. He would not give people credit for things that he found out. And so basically the way they describe it is this, is that let's say Kyle, Woody, and I are building an obelisk, right? And Kyle puts a stone down. Woody puts a stone down. Kyle, Woody. When it gets to the capstone, I put a little capstone on it. And then not only do I say I created the obelisk, I say I own it because I did the last thing on there. Because he was notorious for not acknowledging prior intellectual people. And so here's a bunch of actual examples you can look up. People in his time were like fucking pissed about this, and it gets buried now. In 1878, James Maxwell in Scotland published Special Theory of Relativity in the Encyclopedia Britannica, which Einstein copied heavily in his own 1905 Theory of Relativity and did not cite Maxwell. Didn't cite him. Took all the research that Maxwell did 27 years prior, applied it to his own shit, didn't give him credit. From Maxwell, Einstein, not Epstein. Einstein also on conspiracy.
This conspiracy runs deep.
Pedophile Island. That is a conspiracy.
Yeah. Another key part of relativity was that the idea that speed of light was a constant and was independent of the motion of its source. That's something that Maxwell wrote about in 1878, and then that Einstein co-opted and pretended he discovered in 1905. Maxwell studied the phenomenon of light extensively and first proposed that it was electromagnetic in nature. He wrote that in 1878, stolen by Einstein. 1898, Paul Gerber in Germany publishes the exact equations in Annalen der Physik, which Einstein published 17 years later in 1915 as his perihelion motion of Mercury, with no credit to Gerber, claiming that he was in the dark and he suddenly came to it in his sleep. In 1920, after being pressured on this, Einstein admits to plagiarism. He admitted to it. He admitted that he took that from Paul Gerber in 1898. 1900, Max Planck and Wilhelm Wien of Germany developed the quantum theory, which Einstein plagiarized in his light quantum paper in 1905. He did not cite Planck nor Wien, even though later it was clear that he was copy-pasting, or whatever the version of that was. 1903. Yeah, 1903. Olinto de Preto publishes E equals MC squared in Ate, a scientific magazine which Einstein was an avowed avid reader. He later claimed as his own work, and he failed to cite de Preto. Took the E equals MC squared, published it years later, took it for himself. 1905, Albert publishes 4 groundbreaking essays in the field of theoretical physics. What they don't tell you is that this is stolen from people by the names of James Maxwell, Henrik Lorentz, Joseph Larmor, Olito de Preto, Robert Brown, Ludwig Boltzmann, Frederick Hassenor, and George Fitzgerald. All of these people wrote about this years, sometimes decades prior, and he amalgamated all of their research into an unoriginal piece that he then released without citing any of them. And media, pop culture grabs onto that and says, oh my God, Einstein's discovered all this. Meanwhile, lots of concurrent contemporary peers of his are saying, what the fuck? Like, this was an actual thing in the scientific community at the time. You want to hear about it now? They're like, dude, Einstein, what the fuck, dude? Like, we did all this.
Is that
we
a
did
quote?
all. Well,
yeah, 1908.
What?
Dude. First use of the word. He does get the first use of the word dude.
Hey, motherfucker, what the hell's up with you, copying my discoveries, is what he said. It was like, what the fuck? They were all very, like, this is a real thing. Scientists hated him because he would never cite people who discovered things. He would take it, pretend it was his. 1915, Einstein presents his paper and publishes the general theory of relativity based on the mathematics of Marcel Grossmann and Bernhard Riemann from a decade prior. Again, he does not cite these men. It was 1878 that the theory of relativity was first getting put, into popular scientific understanding by James Maxwell. These other guys built on it, and Einstein failed to acknowledge any of their contributions, instead doing the thing that lots of scientists accused him of, which was laying a capstone on something and then claiming ownership of everything that came prior, instead of doing what most scientists do, which is, hey, I added a little bit here. Thank you, Weissman, blah, 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 all of them for it. So a little additional thing, he was apparently so unimpressive as a physicist that he wasn't even consulted in the Manhattan Project. 130,000 people were consulted on the Manhattan Project, and apparently Einstein wasn't up to snuff. Henry Poincaré was the foremost expert on relativity in the late 19th century, and the first person to formally present the theories, having published more than 30 books and over 500 papers on the topic. Extensive documentation exists that Einstein and his associates have studied Poincaré's theories and mathematics for years, yet when Einstein published his almost wholly plagiarized work, he made no reference to Poincaré's mathematics. Like I said earlier, a non-comprehensive list of those that's confirmed, absolutely confirmed, he plagiarized from James Maxwell, Henrik Lorentz, Joseph Larmor, and a dozen others. In 1895, Einstein failed the entrance exam to an engineering school in Zurich. That's interesting. I thought he was like a hyper genius. Here's Nikola Tesla on Einstein. Einstein's relativity work is a magnificent mathematical garb which fascinates, dazzles, and makes people blind to the underlying errors. The theory is like a beggar clothed in purple who ignorant people take for a king. Its exponents are brilliant men, but they are metaphysicists rather than scientists. Do you know that while he was doing all these things, he worked as a clerk in a patent office? He worked as a clerk in a patent office, a third-level clerk. Throughout years and years there, they never promoted him. They never made him any more significant. He was a third-class clerk at a government office in Bern, never progressed beyond this level with even years of experience. By all contemporary reports, Einstein wasn't even an accomplished mathematician. It has been well documented that much of the mathematical content of Einstein's so-called theories were well beyond his ability. Walter Isaacson, president of the Aspen Institute, stated that Einstein's first wife, Mileva Maric, was quote, a Serbian physicist who had helped him with his math. Other prominent scientists have made the claim that his wife did a lot of his math for him. Oof. In 1907, Einstein admits to plagiarism. In a paper he wrote in 1907, in part responding to already virulent accusations of plagiarism, Einstein declared that plagiarism was perfectly acceptable as a form of ethical research, stating, quote, "The nature of physics is that what follows has already been partly solved by the authors. I am therefore entitled to leave out a thoroughly pedantic survey of the literature," end quote. In other words, the scientists all built on each other's work, so Einstein could freely compile the work of everyone before him and represent it as his own, with no obligation to even mention them or their work. His view of ethical science was like building a tower where each person adds one stone, and if I had the last stone, I not only take credit for the entire design and construction of the tower, but I own the building. Final note. In 1953, Sir Edmund Whittaker published a detailed account of the origin and development of all the theories and equations of his physics, with extensive reference to the primary sources, documenting beyond doubt that Einstein had no priority in any of it, and clearly stating so in his report. Einstein was alive and well when Whittaker published his book, yet he offered no dispute to the conclusions, no refutation of Whittaker's claim that he, Einstein, had been irrelevant in the entire process. Einstein made no attempts at his own defense and hid in the bushes, ignoring all accusations.
Amazing, man. You missed some good parts, Taylor, because I fucking hate Einstein. Not as much as I hate COVID, but I fucking hate that clown, that bloviating prick. He took credit for everybody's shit and then used it to wax philosophical for the rest of his life. Here's the best part: Einstein, religious zealot. Einstein viciously and famously denied the existence or the validity of quantum mechanics until his death, quoting, "God does not play dice with the universe." I'm sorry, Einstein, but what does God have to do with physics? I think he also stole E equals MC squared from either Lorentz or Dirac. Dirac, who is barely functionally autistic, taking advantage of a mentally infirmed man to further his scientific career. Disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. The reason he was not asked to be in the Manhattan Project is because Oppenheimer knew he was a pussy. That's why. And he would never use the weapon. The nuke, that beautiful nuke, was intended to be a tactical war battlefield device, and he knew that Einstein would either not support it or give it away to the enemy. So he kept him out of it on purpose. Fuck Einstein.
So your theory is that the Jewish guy was pro-Nazi?
No, he was very left-leaning. He was denied security access, and all the other scientists were also told not to discuss the
all of this
project with Einstein.
I left that one kind of unconvinced.
It was Einstein's letter, though, that made the Manhattan Project even happen.
That's true.
I got that. It's like, hey, we need to, get a move on this thing because Hitler might be doing it. I like it. I like what you said, but you could do the same thing with Led Zeppelin and old blues singers. So Led Zeppelin is the band that just happened to get popular with it. They stole all of it from old black blues singers, and you only wanted Led Zeppelin because they presented it in a better way. So
Elvis.
there's some equity in how maybe he was just more entertaining with his wacky hair. Maybe that obelisk, like in a video game where you add on, but it's not real. It's like a framework or lattice work until that last thing is put on, and then it goes boom, and now it's one piece. So until you put that last piece on, it's not really a full thing yet, and you do own it after.
And it's my suspicion that you could do that with most scientists, right?
Yes,
what do I have to credit everyone from Euclid to? I looked him up. Muhammad IBM Musa Al-Khwarizmi, the inventor of algebra. Number? Yeah.
I went by that radio name back in 1985.
Right. Like it is nearly impossible to credit the entire tower of scientific and mathematic discovery that happened before you got there.
See, but I will add to this. There's a very big difference between them citing Euclid and citing someone who made the exact same discovery 27 years prior or 15 years prior or 2 years prior.
But even your arguments were not exact same. It was, hey, he took this, added to it, and now he gets all this credit for it. And to Anthony's point, there was a whole lot of like, well, shucks, maybe that adding to it was the most important part. It was the thing that made it a useful science, or I don't know.
So maybe I explained it poorly. He wasn't adding to it in the way that you would think. He was amalgamating content.
Your whole theory is based on me understanding amalgamating. That's where it falls apart.
He was the Stan Lee of physics.
He was taking
bits and pieces with you. I know.
He was taking bits and pieces of already established science and then reformulating it into something. And he would put his own take on there, and then that's what Tesla added to it. He would say,
like a stupid artist would take paints of different color and dab them and make a beautiful paint.
Not in that way.
I get it. What a hack.
That's not entirely what I'm saying.
He's more like a react video on YouTube. You would watch the movie and then go, whoa, what did you guys think of my react video? Wasn't that entertaining? He's watching The Godfather 2 going, oh man, wow. Hey everybody, check this out. What did you think of my movie?
Oh, fuck.
Look at Tesla. Look at Tesla's take on him. His take said it better than I could because Tesla was way fucking smarter than me or Einstein. And he said, basically, he compiled a bunch of information from previous research, and then he, on top of that, would add almost sophistry that wasn't falsifiable and wasn't useful. That's what Tesla's take was.
Tesla. Oh, AC is better than DC. That guy.
Tesla died like completely penniless, in love with a pigeon, right?
I don't care.
Was it a hot
pigeon in a hotel room, in a shitty hotel room, in love with a pigeon?
You know what a good sign is that someone's a fucking genius is that they die alone in a hotel room in love with a pigeon.
I'm right on target.
I feel like Taylor could go either way on that argument. Like that's a sign of a genius. That's the sign of a moron. Whatever supports his argument.
Oh, you're absolutely right. The whole point is to present the argument the way I want to present it.
Yeah. I enjoyed it, Taylor.
But also, like
you opened too big with the Helen Keller thing, my friend.
Yeah, would it have been better to close with Helen Keller?
If you closed with Helen Keller, we all would have been considering the other ones, and then Helen Keller would have been like, "Oh fuck, of course."
I hope everybody's convinced of Helen Keller at least, because that's
please.
Yeah, I'm convinced of Helen Keller. That one wins for sure. Not only was it pretty entertaining, but I'm pretty sure that she was a retarded person.
You convinced Helen Keller the fifth.
Yeah.
She's like, she watched the show and said, yes, fuck her.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm open to the idea that she was environmentally retarded, right? Like because of a lack of audio and visual stimuli, she was never. She might not have been born with a broken brain, but how could she have developed a fully formed one?
Well, retarded doesn't necessarily mean that like her brain wasn't functional. It just means she's held back. She's restrained in some way or another. And by that definition, she's retarded.
But to not have the input like that. Even as a kid watching that movie, as a kid, I would think like, well, how the hell would you know if someone signs into your hand what they're even trying to reference? You could go like this and go glass and then do some kind of letters. But there's no way to really make the connection. There's too many missing parts. You could think, like you said, is it like something hard, thin, this? Like, what are you trying to tell me? Yeah, that would let me know that what you're spelling is what this is.
Yeah,
crazy.
An understanding of meaning
Right.
at all. No way whatsoever. And so I'm glad that one resonated.
Oh,
Damn,
I love that one.
Getting into this episode being like, dude, the Helen Keller one isn't going to work very well, but the Einstein one, that one's going to go good for me. Complete opposite. Just goes to show.
I still think Einstein, what are you going to do?
I would never say
he's Einstein. I think it was just a better he presented it. But people, I don't know. Did he schmooze with the right people in the media that put him over?
Yeah.
Maybe. And that's part of, that was part of the whole thing, I guess.
Here's what it is with me and Einstein. The modern scientists seem to have a lot of respect for him. When you hear Stephen Cox speak, he speaks really highly of Einstein.
Stephen Hawking?
No, Cox, I think. COX. Do I have his name wrong?
Oh.
Who's Stephen Cox?
Name.
Fucking genius, teaches in England or something. Let me see if
porn star.
Of
course.
He was on Joe Rogan's show. That's where I discovered him.
It seems like Einstein is like the kind of guy who will like those Facebook pages that are like, I fucking love science.
His name's Brian Cox. I don't know if that fixes it.
Oh, Brian Cox.
Stars.
Sounds like Einstein was no Einstein. So it sounds like
like when you listen to guys like Brian Cox and I can't name a bunch of modern scientists. Neil Tyson deGrasse, maybe that's
it.
Yeah.
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Thanks, Anthony. These guys seem to have a lot of respect for Einstein. Therefore, I do. That's where my thing comes from.
But they know who they're talking to. Like they're smart and they're shamelessly self-promotional. They know exactly the audience that they're not going to get up there and go, hey, by the way, Einstein was an idiot. I just wanted you guys to know. They're going to go, you know what? Einstein was smart and all of you are smart for thinking he was smart. Now, get out your checkbooks and write.
Pretty good.
Buy my book. That's the plan.
He's pretty good. That's a good point. They are very self-promoting. Scientists, like if you know a scientist's name, he's already a piece of shit. Self-promoting. I can't imagine anyone would know a real scientist's name.
That's a strong point.
Yeah. Back up there, thank you.
There's someone out there working on a COVID vaccine, and none of us know. Who she is.
No one will ever know.
I don't want to know.
Name.
He shouldn't have fucking time to tell me his name.
Right? He shouldn't be on the JRE doing interviews.